So anyway, that's how I ended up naked in the elephant pen, and I explained it to the owner, and everything was fine after the lawsuit.
Yeah, but what about the elephant? I mean, he must have been taken for a loop.
He was surprised. Anyway, you wanted to interview me.
Wow. I really enjoyed the book.
Thanks.
It's more pulpy than The Martian.
Of course you would say that, right?
But
have you ever opened an interview with like, "Hey, your book was shit. Let's talk about that."
No. In a good way. I mean,
Thank you.
reading the book, I felt
no,
this like it's a Western, a frontier town. And then when she assembles the mission at the end, it's
sure.
just like, the sheriff getting the posse together. We've got to go into the bad guy's lair or something. And it was just such a, it's a caper film.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Ocean's 11, but
It's exactly what it is. It's a good old-fashioned heist story. It's just set on the moon. Well, and then The Martian was just a good old-fashioned Robinson Crusoe kind of like stranded castaway thing. So, yeah.
What kind of films were you influenced by, and/or books or television shows growing up?
In general, or things that led to Artemis?
Yeah, just in general.
Well, for books, it was my father's science fiction collection. I don't think the guy's ever thrown away a book in his life.
That's great.
And so he had this huge. So I'm 45 years old, but I grew up reading the previous generation's science fiction, like juveniles from the 50s and 60s and 70s. And so my kind of holy trinity are Asimov, Heinlein, and Clarke. Those are who I grew up reading. I mean, like some of Dad's books, I'd be reading through them, and at the exact middle point, there'd be an ad for Kent cigarettes.
Right.
And then
or the Columbia record collection or something.
Right. Well, what's even better, cigarettes. Like an ad for cigarettes in a book for kids, but it was the 50s. What are you going to do? So those are the things that influenced me, kind of my notion of sci-fi, and of course, like Star Trek, and Doctor Who. And things that I watched as a kid.
I'm old enough to where I can remember the moon landing. It's like the Kennedy assassination. You don't forget it. Where I was at band camp. It was a Sunday night.
This one time at band camp?
Yeah. I was 13 years old, but Star Trek was such a pivotal part of my growing up. Not to digress, but the first season, they had an episode called The Menagerie, which was a two-parter.
Yeah.
And they didn't have VCRs or...
That was the pilot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the second part was on Thanksgiving night. And my cousins were over, and my mom said, they get to choose what we watch on television. But the Star Trek, I got to watch that.
I got to watch part two.
And so right in the 30-minute mark, my cousin wanted to watch CBS Thursday Nights, the movies, which was Jason the Argonauts, which is a cool film.
Hey,
but
Harry Harryhausen with the stop motion animation. That's serious stuff.
But that traumatized me because I had to wait until reruns, and that was 6 months until I could catch the last 30 minutes. It was just for a young kid, it was just too much.
That's horrifying.
And you mentioned Isaac Asimov. He wrote for TV Guide. Back in the 60s, TV Guide was a great magazine.
It was the big thing.
Yeah. He'd have regular articles. Buckminster Fuller would do a cover story. It was different than, totally different landscape. Anyway, sorry, I got off the point. Any sci-fi movies growing up or?
Well, I mean, of course. I mean, there's, the Star Trek movies I actually like a lot. Star Wars, obviously. But what's funny is, like, most of the science fiction movies didn't really land that well with me, or with anyone else. There are very few science fiction movies that really kind of did well. And the ones that other people liked, like, as a kid, 2001 is not that interesting. I mean, as an adult, you get all the stuff that's going on. I got a sneeze coming on, hang on.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. Sorry about that. As an adult, 2001 is this very intricate and layered story and stuff like that. But as a kid, it's just boring. And so,
a lot of talking.
Yeah, it's a lot of yakety yak, and then like long periods of silence and so. But yeah, I just the Star Trek films were the ones that really got me. Oh, also as a little kid, I loved watching Lost in Space.
I love Lost in Space.
Yeah.
When there's an episode, again, I'm watching it, in the original time frame where Will Robinson is transported back to Earth. It's like 1996, and he's trying to call NASA, and they don't believe him. And then, okay.
Nice.
There is, so.
And the theme song by John Williams.
Exactly.
And there are
And
two theme songs.
Yes, because the third season, they changed it. Also,
Yeah.
Lost in Space was on CBS on Wednesday nights, on Central Time, and there's a show called Batman on ABC.
Oh, yeah.
Like the second season. And then Batman, I got to watch the first 30 minutes of Batman, then go to
Then
Lost
go
in
over
Space.
there, yeah,
It's like
yeah.
kind of. Anyway, obviously, I'm an expert map person.
Okay.
So this is my map of the moon.
Okay.
And it seems like when they did all the Apollo missions, they're all pretty close to one another. And because you got the whole moon, and I guess you can't land on the dark side of the moon because of radio transmissions.
Right. If they would have had to relay everything through the command service module, or some satellite that they put up, and there would have been a lot of LOSs, and the last thing they wanted was LOSs with the astronauts on the surface. And so they decided everything would be on the near side. And these are not unreasonably clustered. I mean, this is a pretty good sample. These sites are chosen very carefully because of the diversity of terrain available. I mean, 11 was just to see if we could do it.
Right.
12 was to show that, and it was in the Sea of Tranquility. It was in the, and so they wanted to see how those lava flows formed. 12 was in a little bit different, a little more cratered area, and they wanted to prove that that they could land accurately. So they were aiming for the surveyor satellite. And then 14 kind of took over the responsibilities that 13 was going to have, and they landed in the Fraumora Highlands, which is a completely different terrain. It's like the difference between, the difference between the plains of the Midwest and the Alps. I mean, it's like, and then 15 got even more crazy with the Apennine Mountains. They went into just like really super rocky terrain, and they were worried that those guys wouldn't be able to land there at all. And the astronauts are like, F you, we'll land wherever we want. Yeah, you tell us where to land, we'll put it there. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. And so on. And so they may seem like they're closely clustered, but they're all extremely different terrain types and parts of the moon that were pretty well selected, I think.
Was Apollo 11 on the equator of the moon?
No, it's close.
Okay.
But it's not. It's at about I can do this. It's at about, I think, 24 degrees.
All right. Okay. So.
Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. It's at about 24 degrees west. It's actually just like 1 or 2 degrees off of the equator.
I've got this like 30-year-old Rand McNally globe of the moon that I used, and I marked the landing spots, but it looks like it's the equator on that globe.
It's really, really close. Yeah, my father had this map that he gave me when I was a kid, that he'd had for a while of the moon, right? And it was a map of the moon, but it was just the near side. And I'm like, why isn't this showed the far side? And he's like, well, check the date. And the map's from 1959. So it was before the Soviets sent the probes to the far side. Like, nobody had seen the other side of the moon.
It's so amazing.
It's just amazing. Yeah, I mean, that was just knowledge that did not exist at all at the time.
Okay, when you're reading the news, or what do you think about when you hear about something like Ross 128b?
Well, I mean, exoplanets are always pretty exciting and interesting, but in the end, I think people make a little bit too much out of it. Just because something is in the Goldilocks zone of a star doesn't mean that, there's going to be life there. There's a bunch of random crap floating kind of in Earth's orbit, near our orbit, little things, and we don't expect every little rock to have life. So, I mean, it's cool. It's very cool, but let's keep our feet on the ground.
Did you like the film Interstellar?
I wasn't as into it. I really liked the science in it. I did. The story I was less excited by. I'm like, really, if Earth is having this much problems, it's a lot easier to solve the problems on Earth than it is to fund an interstellar mission, right? But whatever. But I loved the science in it, like all the general relativity stuff.
The guy back on the command ship who's aged 28 years and it's 2 weeks later for them. Or something.
Right. Well, and that's all real. Like Kip Thorne did all the math for them to calculate like how this black hole would affect things. fun fact, Kip Thorne just won the Nobel Prize for being part of the group that proved there were gravity waves.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
One of the interesting things that I learned from reading this book, this future watch, the Patek Philippe, which has, like the moon, I mean, the Earth would appear to wax and wane differently than the moon does from Earth.
In the reverse order.
Yeah. But to have that watch made, do you, had you contacted the company? And
Oh, no, not
are they
at all.
possibly going to make that watch? Because their watches make Rolexes look like
Crap. No, the Patek Philippe are just fantastic watches. No, I didn't contact the company at all. I just decided, I'll take like, what if I, what would my dream watch be, And I went, okay, Patek Philippe, and I'm like, well, what changes would you want to make if you're Trond Landvik, a multi-billionaire, and you can have whatever you want,
Exactly.
And so I think a phase of the Earth dial is neat, and also the self-winding weight inside had to be made out of tungsten because the lunar gravity is low, so you need it to you need it to get a little more, you need to increase the inertia of the weight so that it'll self-wind as effectively as it would in Earth's gravity.
Oh, that's fascinating. How long can a person actually survive without a suit on the moon?
Just
in seconds, minutes?
Well, it's actually surprising. So you'll be unconscious within seconds. Mm-hmm. So you won't experience most of this. And we actually have some, well, I'll get to that in a second. You'll be unconscious within seconds, but you can survive up to like a few minutes. And the reason is because it's not like, you don't just explode like you see in science fiction. What happens is you'll start to, like, your mucous membranes, the liquids will boil off of them. You'll start to get a lot of damage in various parts of your body. You might have hemorrhaging and not hemorrhaging. What do you call it? Aneurysms and stuff inside your lungs, but you won't. Burst blood vessels. That's what it is. But you won't have like irreversible physical effects until you start to actually starve the brain of oxygen. So really what's killing you is suffocation. Mm-hmm. And so that takes as long to kill you as it would if you were like,
Somebody was putting a pillow over your head while you were
exactly,
sleeping.
right. And so you can actually survive. If somebody saves you, you'll be okay. And the only question is how much brain damage did you suffer from having the limited oxygen for a while. However, if you're out on the surface of the moon when this happens, you're going to get one hell of a sunburn.
What is the temperature on the moon? Just without a helmet?
Okay, so the temperature is a different problem than the unfiltered sunlight hitting you directly. So that's like this big. There's an awful lot of stuff calming the sunlight down before it gets down to us here on the surface of Earth. On the moon, there's none of that. So there's this massive barrage of UV light hitting you. Just if you were out there for a minute, you'd have a hell of a sunburn. The surface temperature of the moon during the lunar day is over 100 degrees Celsius, enough to boil water, enough to give you severe burns on your body wherever you're touching it. The surface temperature at night is like minus 180 degrees Celsius. Very, 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 very cold. So depending on what time of day you did it, you would either get severe burns from touching the ground, because of course you'll fall unconscious, so you'll fall to the ground. You'll get severe burns where you touch the ground, or if you're on the night side, you'll get severe burns where you touch the ground, because you get a cold burn, because the heat exits your body so fast that you end up with burn and damage, and frostbite. So yeah, I advise against it if you were thinking about doing that.
Yeah.
Don't.
No, when I was a kid, I read a Dick Tracy comic strip, and somehow Dick Tracy was on the moon, and somebody had their helmet off, and they just it froze their lungs immediately.
Okay,
like the guy who was the artist has like the icicles hanging off his face and stuff.
Yeah.
The hamster balls that the tourists use. What is that? That's just like a big ball where you're walking and.
Yep, it's a hamster ball. It's literally that thing. It's a flexible polymer that is like airtight and thick enough that if they roll over a sharp rock, it doesn't pop and they die. In fact, it's actually kind of a lot of work to get to puncture it. But in the end, it's this big, thick material, and you walk around in it just like a hamster would in a hamster ball. and you have a backpack on that regulates and manages the air inside of that. And kind of the main limiter of it isn't the main limiter is heat rejection. So if you're out on the surface during the day, you've got like a lot of heat. Like I mentioned, it's 100 Celsius, which is over 200 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface, and there's also a lot of sunlight hitting the ball. The ball has the material is shaded so that you get just a reasonable, from your point of view, it looks like kind of a normal amount of light outside. But all of that blocked light plus all of the heat you're getting from the ground just turns into heat, and it's heating up the ball. And it doesn't have anywhere to go. There's no atmosphere outside. So other than blackbody radiation, which is kind of a different thing, mostly what it's going to do is heat up the air inside. And so it'll be like baking you in an oven. And so to combat that, the backpack that you have on, in addition to removing carbon dioxide and adding oxygen to the air and making sure the pressure stays good and all that stuff like that, and monitoring your vitals and the health of the ball, it also has basically a big block of ice inside that it runs the air through to cool it. So the state change, actually, melting ice consumes a really large amount of heat energy. And so a block of ice in your backpack is enough to maintain the temperature of the ball for about 2 hours. I did all the math on that.
Wow.
So you can have a 2-hour EVA with that one block of ice, and then once that melts, then you got to get back inside, or you're just going to start heating up and die.
20th Century Fox has bought the rights to the book.
Yes,
Lord
they have.
Miller, her pretty amazing filmmaking team, are attached as directors.
Yeah,
of course,
really
that's nothing is etched in stone in Hollywood.
Oh yeah, no, there's a million steps between now and green light that would have to all go right, but fingers crossed.
Was Ridley Scott the original director attached
No.
to The Martian?
Oh no, he wasn't. It was originally going to be Drew Goddard, who wanted to write and direct it, and he wrote a fantastic screenplay. But then he got offered the director's chair for the next Spider-Man movie by Sony, so he went off and worked on that, but remained the writer, the screenwriter for The Martian.
We're going to science the shit out of this.
Yep, that's a Drew Goddard line.
Right.
And it's funny how often people in signing lines and autograph lines are like, "Oh, science the shit out of it in the book." I'm like, "Okay, that line's not in this book." Great line. Wish I'd wrote it.
Do you have any say in how the film is made as far as, the casting? It's such a diverse cast.
Right.
And obviously, hey, Emma Stone wants to be in the film. And be like, okay, now we can overnight greenlight it or something.
So no, I have no say. My only job on the film is to cash the check. Which
is not a bad job.
It's a good job. I have no say, no authority, no nothing. They'll ask me my opinion but they don't have to listen to me at all. But it's clear to me that Ward and Miller care a lot about the ethnicities of the characters. They don't want it to be a whitewashed production. So they're even saying like, well, we may, because there's a limited pool of actresses who look like Jazz and are as young as Jazz and are like big names. There aren't that. There are, and you kind of want a big name if you're going to make a high budget film, right? And so they're saying, well, we might have to do a discovery to play Jazz, so someone who's not as well known.
And have all
in which case, yes, the other characters would have to be big names to have the draw.
I mean, if I was a big name actor, I would want to be a part of this film.
That'd be cool.
Saying.
Cool.
I just started reading the book. I didn't read anything about it. I just knew it was your next book. And I was about, 10, 12 pages in before I realized Jazz was a woman.
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of cool.
That was not intentional.
Because obviously you read the blurbs now, it's like a young woman.
Yeah.
And, it's...
that wasn't intentional. That's just sort of a funny thing. I thought it was, I don't know why, I guess because she was so, I had such a clear view of her in my mind as the character that she was, that I kind of forgot to tell the reader that she's a woman.
No, I love that. I love that kind of sense of discovery. Yeah. And
it was not some clever ruse on my part. It just worked out that way.
So, are there any companies right now? I mean, obviously, Artemis has come into being because of all these private companies and have kind of leveled the playing ground as far as who's going up and back in space. Are there any companies right now that you think this is the company you need to go get a job with? Or?
Oh, well, I mean, SpaceX obviously gets a lot of attention in the media, but other companies and they're doing great stuff. But a lot of other companies are doing kind of the same things. They're just more quiet about it. So like Orbital ATK, ULA, Boeing, they're all working on stuff and working on driving the prices down. SpaceX has turned the industry on its ear, and so now all of a sudden these other booster manufacturers have to figure out how to be competitive on price, which is great. That's what we want. The whole conceit of Artemis is that the price to low Earth orbit has been driven down enough that middle-class people can afford to go into space. It's really, really expensive. It's a lot cheaper to have a nice European vacation, but it's doable. It's achievable. And that, in turn, makes lunar tourism achievable because the hardest part about getting to the moon is getting off of Earth. Also, I don't want to give you any spoilers. I don't know how far into the book you are yet.
I've completely read it.
Oh, you read the whole thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
The last 100 pages.
Yeah.
I'm staying up all night if I have to finish it.
No, well, thank you. Thank you.
That's why I'm saying I think it would work so well as a movie because it's just the way it progresses, and that third act is just going to be like nonstop action.
Thanks. I'm glad you liked it. Believe it or not, like one of the main, and people are often surprised when I tell them this, one of the main inspirations of the story, one of the things that kind of got me thinking along these lines is the movie Chinatown. Because Chinatown is all about the ugly, nasty stuff that happens under the hood for a city to grow. Really.
The water.
Yeah, the water. If I can't bring the water to Los Angeles, I'll bring Los Angeles to the water.
Great.
John Huston.
Yes.
Great guy. Well, I don't know if he's a great guy. Great actor. Fun fact, when they're filming that, there's a line where John Huston is talking to Jack Nicholson is like, "Are you sleeping with my daughter?" Right? Well, because Faye Dunaway, whatever. Right. But in real life, at that time, Jack Nicholson was dating Angelica Houston.
Right.
So he was sleeping with her daughter.
Boom.
Yes. Fun line. So anyway, Chinatown's one of my favorite movies ever. Looks like we're getting our 2 minute.
Okay.
We're getting our 2 minute warning here. And I wanted to make a story that's really about the city. And so that was my goal.
You've said in other interviews there could be a sequel to
this
absolutely. Because is there a chance that a gray-haired Mark Watney would somehow meet Jazz on the moon?
I guess, there's nothing that excludes them being in the same continuity, and he would be fairly old by that time. But no, I had the idea of not a direct sequel, but just more stories that take place in Artemis, not necessarily with the same main characters or the same leads. And so, people who are major characters in Artemis might be secondary or tertiary characters in these other books.
Yeah. No, I'd like to. Rudy is the sheriff in town.
Rudy is the
he's the Gary Cooper.
Yeah.
And no, I would love to see his story.
Actually,
because he sounds like a pretty badass dude.
That's actually what I'm working on.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, well, not his backstory, but he's the main character of the.
Were you also working on a novel about faster than light travel?
Yes.
Or is that just something on the back burner?
Well, it's on the back burner, and I turned off the burner.
Okay.
But between The Martian and Artemis, I got 70,000 words into a book called Zhek. That was going to be a more space opera. Had faster than light travel, aliens, telepathy, all sorts of fun stuff like that. But it just wasn't good. It just wasn't working. And it was really painful. After a year of working on it, 70,000 words in, for reference, the Martian is just 100,000.
Okay.
So I'm just like, this isn't working, and I can't figure out how to fix it, and I don't think it's salvageable. And so with the publisher's permission, I hit the big red reset button and started brand new on a completely different project. And that was Artemis. And that hurt. That hurt.
No.
Just basically flushing a year of work aside, but it was not a good book. I've set aside, there are elements of it of Zhek that I think are really, really